let's get to these games. All right, let's start with Alabama. So Alabama loses to Vandy. Wow. I mean, did not see that coming, but again, everything that I just said is true. Alabama loses 40-35. Vandy scores 40 points on Alabama. And I immediately started thinking to myself when I was thinking about this Alabama team, which I've covered, by the way, and we'll get to all that. And I went back and watched some of this film from the Vandy game, specifically on the defensive side. And you know what it reminded me of? You know what this team reminds me of? This team is the Lincoln Riley Oklahoma teams. They're a team that is elite on offense, and the defense is not very good. Not even like not playing well. The defense is just not very good. And we're starting to see that come to fruition. I tried to ring these alarm bells all the way back when I was preparing for the Wisconsin game. If you remember those shows, and if you're like a fan of the show, and you would be subscribed to the YouTube channel, which you should do that right now, by the way, if you haven't, or you would be following us and rating and reviewing us wherever you're listening to your podcast. That would be awesome too. You'd be leaving a comment down below. And if you've been listening since then, I told you that the problem in question for Alabama was on the defensive side. And I said all the way back then, I said, listen, this team is going to be in some shootouts that are going to be surprising. And that's going to happen during the course of the season. I didn't expect it against Vanderbilt, but that's exactly what's happened this season for Alabama. Look at what they've done defensively, or not done, I guess more accurately, in the last 6 quarters. Look at the last 6 quarters. They've given up 67 points and 784 yards in the last 6 quarters of football. Alarm bells. Alabama's defense is not getting better. And here's the thing, the same things that were happening on the film against South Florida and then on the field against Wisconsin are happening still. And they happened in the second half against Georgia. They happened the entire game against Vanderbilt. So this is not a one-off. Tide fans, like, I'm telling you right now, this team is going to be in several more shootouts. Good thing you have Jalen Milroe. Good thing you have Ryan Williams, who's spectacular, by the way. I love watching that guy play. He is so graceful on the football field. I absolutely love it. Watching film of Ryan Williams is just a joy. That offense is spectacular. And guess what? There's only been one game that they haven't scored 41 or more points, and they lost. This reminds me so much of those OU teams, and I covered those OU teams constantly, and it was always the same thing. It was Baker and CeeDee Lamb and Rodney Anderson and then Kyler Murray and then Jalen Hurts, and they always had to outscore people, and that's the direction that this Alabama team is going. They remind me of those Oklahoma teams, and guess what? Those Oklahoma teams, if you remember, they would get to the playoff, first of all, and then we would all say the same thing. They don't have a good enough defense to win the national championship. And guess what? At this point, that's the truth about Alabama. And this is the exact reason why last week when they lost to when they beat Georgia, I said even in a loss, I believed more in Georgia than I did Alabama because of all of these truths. You know, when you turn on the film, like, it's troubling for the Bama defense. You pull up some of these notes right here. First and foremost, when you look at them in pass defense, they constantly are out of position or exercising poor technique, specifically at corner. They're in man coverage, and the wide receivers can create all sorts of separation. They do not play picks very well. And credit to Clark Lee and this Vanderbilt staff because they had a great game plan. It was creative. They did a lot of things on the outside that made it difficult on the Bama defense, but Bama's defense did not play it well at all. They didn't pass off pick routes. They weren't communicating in the secondary, which is exactly what I was telling you earlier in the year when I saw it on film against South Florida, when I saw it against Wisconsin. It showed up against Georgia, and then it certainly showed up against Vanderbilt. So yes, the pass defense is a problem, but that wasn't even the main problem of what we saw in that game against Vanderbilt. They could not stop Vanderbilt from running the football. And you talk about a defensive front being out of position constantly. Alabama was constantly out of position up front. They were not gap sound. I cannot tell you how many times they had two players chasing the quarterback and then he would shovel underneath. I can't tell you how many times I saw then two people chase the running back and then all of a sudden the quarterback keeps it. I'm like, do you guys not know who's responsible for which player or which gap? Because it certainly looked like on film, they didn't know what they were doing. Whole masses of people chasing. It was like little kids soccer. It was like four guys would just like race out with the fake and then just like, oh, there's Pavia just right up the middle. I'm like, dang, man, this is not what I'm expecting. And then late in the game, they couldn't get off the field. They could not get off the field. It was shocking to watch them late in the game. Poor run fits against quarterback run. And then late with 2 minutes to go, really poor technique. They're catching the blocks. So they're not taking anything on at the line of scrimmage. They're catching the blocks. They're trying to run around blocks. So they're getting blocked in their chest. They're playing with no leverage whatsoever. And the safety is sitting back there at 18 yards. There's 2 minutes to go. What are you like? They're not throwing it deep. And if they do, tip your cap. Like this happens all the time. This was happening in the Minnesota-Michigan game last week when I was calling it, and I was losing my mind in the booth, and I'm starting to do it all over again because I'm watching this film. I'm like, what are you doing? Like, get up to the line of scrimmage. You know exactly what's going to happen. And not only are they not playing with gap integrity, so they're out of position, they're not playing with good fundamentals because they're playing high, getting blocked and receiving the blocks in their chest, and the structure's wrong. Man, like, folks, Bama's got an issue, and it's not going to get any better anytime soon. It's been the exact same issue for 4 straight games. That means it's going to continue, which means I think at a minimum, you're looking at 2, probably more like 4 or 5 absolute shootouts the rest of the year. This offense is going to have to be one of the best offenses and most explosive offenses in college football, which it is. Don't get me wrong. Remember, those OU teams still went to the playoffs. Those OU teams still won their conference. In fact, the Baker team probably could have beat Georgia in that overtime game. I mean, it was close. It's right there, right? It's a play here or there. They had the ball with a chance to win in that overtime. But I'm just telling you, like, it's harder. They still have to play at Tennessee. They still have to play at LSU. Both of those offenses are pretty good, even though Tennessee didn't play well offensively this last week. So this is going to continue. And then one other troubling trend, and this is following, by the way, Kalen DeBoer from Washington now to Alabama. They're 114th in penalty yards per game. 114th. And did you see the temper tantrum that Malachi Moore threw at the end of the game? Like, what are we doing? You can't, bro, you're a leader. Like, you've got to hold the standard. Well, let's go back to like, hey, you've got to hold the standard. All right. You're either the refrigerator or you're the gallon of milk. The gallon of milk turns into whatever temperature it's around. The refrigerator turns everything in it to its temperature. You've got to be the refrigerator. And at that point, Malachi Moore is shoving guys. He's throwing his mouthpiece. He's kicking the football. He's got to be better than that. And I know he is. I know that he is. I told myself and Steve as we were preparing, like, I didn't want to just focus on the teams that lose. And so I know that this is going to make this go a little bit longer, but kudos to Vanderbilt. Okay. You can tell, 1, they played their butts off. 2, their game plan was outstanding. And I love that they weren't trying to just, I've covered games where you can tell that the team that thinks it's going to lose or is a big underdog, they're basically just trying to make it respectable. So they're doing things throughout the game and making decisions throughout the game that are designed only to make the margin less significant in a loss. I've done games like that. Vandy put it all out there. Their game plan was terrific. So Clark Lee, way to go, man. Like that was awesome. It was a great scene, even though it looked like it was about 70% Alabama fans in that stadium. Diego Pavia, the interview at the end was wild. I loved that. I love that they took the goalposts out. Did you see? I saw this post where the fire department had to fish the goalposts out of the river. What is it with people from Tennessee, by the way? They beat Alabama, and it's just immediately like, we got to throw it in the river. Why do we have to do that? Why'd you have to copy Tennessee? I mean, I don't know. You know what else is funny? And I saw all these memes out there on social media as well. Do you know how many bachelorette parties were probably ruined as they're marching the goalposts down the streets in Nashville? That's what I'm here for, and I absolutely love it. They had the ball for 42 minutes. Bama had no sacks. Vandy ran the ball 54 times. They controlled the game. They were 12 of 18 on third down. This was not a fluke. That was a great game and a great performance. And kudos to Vandy. Way to go. Clark Lee. What did I tell you at the beginning of this show? Sometimes failure is the driver of growth. Who'd they lose to? It's like Georgia State or something like that. Guess what? They went back to the drawing board and they got better. Thank you for watching the Joel Klatt Show YouTube channel. And if you liked this clip, make sure to like it and subscribe to the channel. And you can stay up to date on all of my college football coverage.